All right, welcome to another episode of Comic Book Squares. This is going to be a good one. This is Zombie Terrors. We're doing a kind of a scary piece this time. My name's Shane.
I'm Paul.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Mike. Let's get this show started.
All right, welcome back. This is a new episode. We're going to cover a anthology book this time. This is really interesting. This is Zombie Terrors #1 Halloween special. A lot of good stuff in this one. This is going to be an interesting one just because there's 4 different stories. So let's jump right into it. Paul, tell me about it.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Shane. So, like Shane said, this book is by a company called Asylum Press. It was called Zombie Terrors. It was an anthology of 4 different stories. And so you have 4 different writers, 4 different artists. There were 2 variant covers from what I remember. I think we all got the similar cover, but basically Asylum Press is one of those really super independent companies that specializes in horror, sci-fi, and sort of that, a mesh of the two. So they do some really great stuff. And typically, you need to specifically ask for Asylum Press at your comic store or through the company itself. A lot of these don't get carried normally. So this is a really, really, really awesome indie company that's kind of coming into their own. So, in terms of the writers, there's some really great names out there. Frank Forte was the first story. Timothy Bacon was the second story. Brian Quinn was the third, and Dwayne Harris was the fourth. And the artists, Frank, Timothy, Dwayne were all also their own artists. And then again, there were 2 separate covers, and I think we all got the same cover. But really great stories, real interesting to me. It kind of called back sort of the Creep Show, the Twilight Zone type stories, and it was really interesting to read. And I really liked the sharp change between tone and art and writing style for such a really short book. It was only 32 pages, like a typical comic, but you got 4 really great stories.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to your point about having to ask your comic shop to get this, I think we all ran into this where it was out of print, when we did this review. I mean, obviously it was from Halloween, a little harder to find. But these smaller companies, they're not going to do these giant print runs like DC and Marvel for sure. But well worth seeking out and finding for sure. And then one other thing I thought might mention is that for a lot of these, I've been going on to Comixology, and that's a great place to find stuff, and even independent stuff is great on Comixology, just to be able to get stuff and read it and enjoy it. But so let's dive into the first story on it, Recluse. For me, this was my favorite of the stories. It definitely has, like you said, this whole kind of creep show vibe to it. It definitely reminded me of that, the movie and the comics, when I was younger. And this one just, for me, short stories like this, they need to really, set the story up. And initially, it's almost like telling a good joke. You've got to set up the story and then come with a hard punchline. And I felt like this one out of all of them really did that the best. I mean, it was just really crystal clear what the story was. And then there's a solid hit for the punchline at the end. And I thought the artwork was really, really good. This is the one I enjoyed the most right off the bat.
Yeah, and it's kind of a double-edged sword being called Recluse because, first of all, the old man living in the cabin gets bitten by a recluse, but it's an old man living in a cabin in the woods as a recluse. So I like the little play on words. And like you said, you have to say a lot in about 7 or 8 pages, and they really did it.
Yeah, that's the thing is you got to be real quick with these.
Yeah, no, that's what I appreciated about this one. There was the story, this particular story in that I felt like it was the fullest story in those few pages. And you guys brought up Creep Show and stuff. That's what I was reading the whole time. I thought, like, if there was a movie adaptation, Stephen King would have to play himself as, he'd be, in the character, the recluse or whatever. Covered in moss.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of.
It was, the story was really fun. I don't know. And it was just fun because it was totally that Creep Show vibe of like, be careful what you wish for and all that stuff. So it was like this almost a not quite morality play, but you know what I mean. It's like the careful what you wish for, and bad things happen to people with good intentions, kind of stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
and it was fun watching him fall apart, and you know, you kind of see where it's headed. But that's what the fun part of these stories is too. You're like, oh, you know, everybody's gonna think, you know, he's turning into this monster because he's just falling apart.
Mhm.
When he caught on fire, I was like, oh, here we go. Okay, he's
Here we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you were mentioning Creep Show. It also reminded me kind of the introduction, and at the end, it kind of remember Tales of the Crypt, where the Crypt Keeper, you know, kind of introduce the story and wrap up the story. Kind of remind me of that too. It's like that Creep Show, Tales of the Crypt, where, you know, this is so and so, you know, and it kind of introduces the story. But to all of your points, excellent story in a short amount of pages. Great job on that.
Yep. Yeah, they got right to it, and you know, typically you expect a story like this to kind of be drawn, colored, and maybe shaded a little darker, but they kept it kind of bright throughout, which I liked. I appreciate seeing the detail. I think it's harder to create detail like that when you keep it in the light, and I think that, you know, it was great because some art suits some stories really, really well. And sometimes, you know, if you're in the middle of a story and the art isn't quite there, it can take you out of it. But this was, I thought this one was just right. You know, so I agree with you guys. It was a great opener. And that's the Dwayne Harris. So he wrote it and illustrated it, which was really, so that was really great. So, you know, again, you know, there's some different inkers and letterers throughout, but Dwayne Harris did a great job. I thought it was, you know, I see the dad and his son doing this hunting, and I say, you know, here's where we turn back. That's crazy old man Mosley's property, and I'm like, this is not going to go well for anybody. it's always old man Mosley, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
reminded me of Strickland in Back to the Future, you know.
yeah, exactly. Well, actually, when I first heard it, I was almost thinking about, you know, the same thing in The Sandlot. You know, the crazy old guy. That,
the ball goes over the fence.
Yep. Yeah, there's usually one of those in a good story. So as soon as you set that up, then
you know slackers.
You know where it's going. Yep. Well, cool. So if you guys are okay with it, this is what I was kind of thinking about. Since this is an anthology book, I was thinking instead of going piece by piece as far as doing our reviews, I think we would just do it as a collection at the end, as far as an overall for the artwork and the, you know, stories and an overall, just because it's going to be so hard to do each one individually, just time wise. So, all right, cool. So the next one is Freeing the Dead. And you know, I'll start off with, you know, this one. I'll tell you, right when I saw the first panel, I got excited just because just from a personal standpoint, I love that style of like wood block print. It's just such a cool thing to me. The story, on the other hand, this one didn't really grab me. There wasn't like, you know, like we said, there's this good, you know, hard punch at the end for a solid. They didn't stick the landing, essentially. I thought, you know, the concept might have been good, but for me, it just didn't work as far as the ending.
Yeah, I agree with you there because it was the exact same thing, Shane. Like as soon as I turned the page and saw the artwork, I was like, oh my gosh, this looks great. Which is still, I mean, it does. The artwork was awesome. It was really fun to read a comic set up in that style. But then I was waiting for something a little more in the story the whole time. Yeah. Because I had high hopes for it based on the art. But it didn't, it just didn't land, you know, it didn't stick the landing, like you said. It was very interesting because I was like caught up in these two guys and the guy who captures the demons, you know, or I'm sorry, the souls to be tortured by demons. And I was like, okay, where's this going to go? You know, but perhaps they needed, I mean, maybe it could have been, if they had more pages, they could have kind of fleshed out the story. So maybe that was the limitation to it. But overall, the artwork was amazing. The story just kind of missed the mark for me.
Yeah, I mean, as far as, you know, I think we had talked about at one point before is this idea that, you know, comic books in general are a really unique art form. And I think that these short story formats are even a different art form in that you really have to know what your story is going to be going in. and it's got to be something that's just a really right to the point, and like I said, stick that landing and come up with something that's a real zinger. And because you can, like you said, with on other pieces, you can stretch the story out, and sometimes it's a 5-issue, limited series, and sometimes you've got to have a thing that's going to go on for hundreds of issues. So yeah, these short story ones are definitely much more difficult, I think, as far as a writer to get the tone and get it right off the bat. So it's harder.
What I would say is I really liked the script. I liked the story itself, and I did like the art. But here was the thing that kind of threw me. What the artist is in a really important quandary where they need to decide how to format their panels, right? Like, what are you going to contain? Like, how big are you going to make the panel? What are you going to put inside it? How are you going to make it flow? And it just seemed like the panels, to me, like the largest panel just shows all the, as they say, Jesus, just all the statues, and the action panels seemed a little small, I thought. So for me, it was like, I prefer the action panel to be the larger panel. And those panels that just sort of lead up to the storyline can be constructed maybe a little different way. And that's just a personal preference. That's really no true reflection on the artist or the writer. I think that's what sort of took me out of the story. I think it's a good story. It was just my preference would have been that the action panels be a little bigger, but
it's amazing to think about, even today, looking back at, Jack Kirby and the way that his perspective, some of the poses that he did were just screamed out action, and the way that, and just like you said, Paul, the way that he formatted, the frames and to really emphasize something was moving
motion
in the art. Yeah. Once again, that's another really challenging thing to do as an artist, to be in the comic book world, is to be able to show action and keep you engaged visually. Sorry, I cut you off there, Mike.
No, that's okay. Okay. I was just going to say that's kind of the neat thing about sometimes these collection comics. When you have a couple of different stories in a comic book, even if it's different themes, is that the concepts are interesting. It's one of those where we're all individuals and we all like different things when it comes to our comics or to our stories, or and that's what makes the comic genre so fascinating, and there's so much out there, and so not every time is it gonna knock your socks off, and so this second story, kind of similar to all of you. It's kind of interesting to see what you all think of it as well, because I kind of parallel or echo your comments as far as, it wasn't necessarily distracting as far as that goes, but I would say it wasn't as engaging as some of the other stories in the book for me. So
yeah 100%. All right, cool. Well, let's move on to the next one. Nodal. Let me see. Oh, okay. I remember this one now. This one's interesting. This one, I don't know if how long you guys have been collecting, but back in the 80s, there was a book that came out called Shatter. Do you remember this one, Paul? And it became popular for a short period of time because it was the first time that somebody used comic book or computer generated artwork. And they basically did the same kind of thing where they took photos of people, scanned it in, and then did artwork on top of it. And this Nodal had a very similar look and feel to that. I will say this one, I totally got it, that what was happening in the story, and it made sense. And at some points that art style suited it well. I think they did a good job with that. But once again, for this one, the ending, I guess it was just telegraphed so far in advance that it wasn't like a hard punch for me as far as like the punchline. And I just saw it coming and kind of seen this before, and there was no like, oh damn, at the end. So
yeah, it was very it's sort of Alien, Matrix, Blade Runner-ish. But I will say, I enjoyed it. I agree that you did sort of see it coming. You weren't going to resolve this story in like 5 pages, so they kind of painted themselves into a corner. It's nice to sort of have that open ending, but it's it leaves you wanting a little more. Like, man, you could do 32 pages on this and I would probably read this book. But to cut it off the way they did, again, sort of open-ended, which is fair. That's a great story approach. It's just, are you ever going to pick this back up? Because I kind of liked it. I'd like to see it again. But I'm with you, Shane. You could see it coming. But I did enjoy it. I like this. This is probably my favorite story of all of them. Just in front of Recluse. But this was really enjoyable. So those were my two favorites so far. But this one, really grabbed me. I realize the artwork is sort of that CGI picturesque kind of mishmash. But it still needs to be colored and inked and things like that. So I think there was a lot of talent on it, but I was sort of disappointed at the end where it just sort of ended and it was open ended, and you were like, man, how about another page or two? Tell me what really happens here.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
I really liked the artwork because it fed into the story, right? Computer kind of generated artwork in a computer generated world, if you will, or a world where computers are running stuff. The machines are taking over. And to call out like the artwork and stuff, the artwork and all that was fun and good, but also you got to take into account there's a model, an actor, if you will, who's doing that part. And I thought, he emoted well and did well in there. So I really appreciated that. I also, to like Paul, this was one of my favorite stories, I think, in the book, because I wanted more. Like the other ones were like, okay, I get it, it's done, but this was like, I wish there was a whole book. There was like little details, like the guy who's living in this post-apocalyptic world where the robots are taking over whatever. He already has these like I don't know what you'd call them, cybernetic attachments on his body and stuff. So he's living in this future where they were plugging into the system, if you will, already, because he already had all the hookups on him. So like it brings up like what was happening before, what's going to happen now, and all that. So this one had me wishing that there was, like, to Paul's point, like another book on it or a series or something. So that made it fun for me. I didn't really mind that it was open-ended on either end because, well, again, that led to the excitement of the story. Like, wow, that was real. I'm left thinking about it. Whereas the other ones, I finish it and I'm like, cool, that was, well, don't be like that crazy old man living in the cabin, or whatever, and then I'm done. I was sitting there thinking like, what's going to happen, and why were they connected here, and what, how did this virus work that all of a sudden took over his whole body? It was just lots of questions, but in a good way, not like plot hole way. So I liked it.
Yeah, I agree.
Nice.
I think the artwork to me was fantastic. I enjoyed that a lot. Shane, I do remember that comic book, and again, a lot has changed from the 80s style till now and what they can do, and it was a lot more pleasant to look at this time around, that style. And the story, it's one of those where I almost thought like a good movie, right? I mean, Marvel's done it a ton, DC, all the different sci-fi movies, even Star Wars for that matter, where there's so much information that there could be a prequel to it that comes out in the story. That they left it open-ended, whether that was, again, a huge opening on purpose or just by design or, by accident. It's like, okay, well, I would like to Ben's point, I would love to hear more about what led up to these events, what happened after these events. And so let's see the graphic novel, let's see a mini series, let's see some more. So I think, that leaving wanting you more type of feel is sometimes, as a lot of you mentioned in the other stories, right? It's boom, you're done, you understand, you got it. Great. It was a great story. This one, great story. And I want more because there's a lot of unanswered questions. So
yeah, it was good stuff.
It's tough, like you said, with these short ones. It's tough, especially not knowing if they're gonna do another anthology and continue that story, because that's happened before. I think where you've had these short anthology ones, and then they end up, because I think they've done that in like Heavy Metal has a is an anthology book, and they've done that once or twice where they've continued a story over 2 or 3 episodes, or issues. So.
There have been a couple of things out of Heavy Metal that they created in the comic books, like Tarna, the barbarian woman. She's kind of like a mix up of Red Sonja and all them. So yeah.
It's interesting. I feel like that's another interesting thing about these anthology books real quick is that, they're almost like a testing ground to sprinkle something out there into the world and see what the reaction is, to see maybe, see if this works or not before we commit to doing a full book of it and, putting a lot of effort into it. It's almost like comedians out there when they go out and do small clubs and they test out material, to see what's landing and what's not and fine tune it before you put out the real thing. So.
Yep.
Well, cool. Well, let's move on to The Bet. Paul, tell me a little bit about this one.
Yeah, so The Bet is another one of the short stories. It's probably the most, I guess, contemporary, because it reminded me kind of like a Halloween, Friday the 13th type movie. Those teenagers in distress kind of thing. There's a couple of kids decide to jump a fence. The next thing bad things happen. Of course they go through a graveyard. Right there, you could see that coming. That was never going to go well. One kid gets out, one kid gets in, and says, "Ha, yeah, you weren't going to mess me. You weren't going to trick me." And next thing there's like 4 zombies behind him about to eat his face. So it was pretty quick, short to the point. It reminded me in terms of the the comic. It reminded me of The Walking Dead. The first run because now I don't know if you guys know, but they're rerunning the Walking Dead comic. It's called The Walking Dead Deluxe, and it's the same stories, everything. It's just in color now. They've gone back and colored everything.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's been interesting to kind of see it like that, colored this way, inked a little bit differently in color. But this reminded me of kind of the first run of that. So this was one of those open-ended ones, but you knew how it was going to end, right? I mean, I enjoyed it. It was quick, nothing real special about it. Good artwork, a good script, short to the point, just, kind of a Friday the 13th, Halloween, Return of the Living Dead type story. But it was fun to read.
I'm sorry, I gotta jump in. Walking Dead Plus, they're just ringing out as many dollars and cents as they can.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Well,
Robert Kirkman, you don't need any more money, bro. You got lots of stuff, lots of irons in the fire.
Well, it's kind of funny because the Walking Dead show, this is the last season, and all of a sudden there's a new one called I forget what it's called. Something like The Walking Dead Begins or something, and I'm just like, come on.
Because they got Terry Crews is going to be in that one, right? Yeah.
Terry Crews, come on.
Gotta love some Terry Crews. He's the best.
They gotta do some.
So
It's
going to be a Walking Dead sitcom.
Yeah.
It's going to be set in the world of Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah. Right. I think they need to bring in that guy Terry Tate and do Walking Dead linebacker or something where he just takes zombies out. You just.
Oh yes.
Remember Office Linebacker?
I do remember that.
Yep.
That's hilarious.
Yep.
Oh man. No, with the story, this story, it was fun. It was another of the, harkening back to the days of Creep Show comic, the comics and stuff, all that stuff. But it was one of those ones where I was reading and I was going, I'm just trying to get to that last panel where the zombies are behind them because I knew exactly where it was going. So I'm like, okay.
You know what's so funny, Ben? I absolutely love it when you're not a fan of something and your hesitation and you're like, well, yeah, it's so hard for you to say something negative about something. And I think that's hilarious. It just speaks to your personality.
I just know how much work these guys put into it. They're thinking about it and they come up with this cool story. And, as somebody who's loves doing art, my own art and stuff, I get it. I get putting yourself out there. So I feel bad to say I didn't really really, I didn't really like this one.
You know what makes it tough is, I mean, they've been telling these stories for, hundreds of years now, right? I mean, Mary Shelley with Frankenstein, with all that. I mean, horror shows, movies, stories, comics, novels, whatever, go back it's hard to be original. That's the thing, right? And that's why I said this was kind of the contemporary. This was one that, I probably watched this exact story, 2 days ago, right? Just with another name on it. So yeah, they worked hard, and the presentation I think is really good. There was just no originality. But I appreciate what they did, and I think that's where we could probably, we could give them credit for the definitely the work and the effort, but for creativity or originality, it's just not there.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this may have been a little bit better if there was more of a setup. We get right to them in front of the thing, and it might have been interesting. Like, what was the thing that forced them to this location, and just like 1 or 2 extra panels of some history of this location. Because Paul, there's that gravesite in Illinois that you know about. What's it for?
Bachelor's Grove.
Bachelor's Grove. That's the one. Yeah. And so that's exactly what I was thinking about when I saw this gravesite area. For Ben and for Mike, Downers Grove in Illinois is this. It's an old tombstone grave area in the middle of the forest, and so it's kind of one of these things where people are like, "Oh, you got to go out to Bachelor's Grove, and it's spooky and haunted out there, and go at nighttime." And so that's exactly what I was thinking about when I saw this story.
Yeah,
I mean, it would have been
make the cemetery a character, right? Give it. I mean, a panel or 2 or another dialogue box or 2, and put some meat on that bone and tell us why they. I mean, it's easy to just say, well, the kids decided to jump through a cemetery and run through. But like you said, I think that's a good point. Is make it a character, right? I mean, the zombies rise up out of the cemetery. I think I've seen that.
Yeah, and you could even do something as simple as a line of dialogue of like, "Oh, I thought the chemical company took over that property and was tearing it down." Like, that's all it takes, and like, "Oh, okay, so that's the impetus."
Or show. Yeah, or show like the chemical company in the background with like the the green smog and smoke and emissions coming over. You're like, okay, yeah. I mean, but that gives it a character that that kind of adds that little bit of flavor to it. But this going black and white the way they did, I think that their intent was what they did, but I think to rise it to the top a little more, give it that extra kick, maybe a little more.
Yeah, 100%. What'd you think, Mike?
Yeah, wasn't my favorite, just again, as discussed, due to creativity piece of it and originality. Definitely could have used some more information. I think you were talking, even look at Resident Evil, right? I mean, it's been done, right? You got monsters, you got zombies, but what's the story? Like, what about Resident Evils makes it unique? And so, that's where to each of your points, you could add a little bit more and totally put an interesting spin on it. So again, I'm like all of you. I don't like putting down people's hard work because if it doesn't grab me, that's okay. It could grab other readers. So, but good story.
Yeah, I mean, fun stuff.
Nice.
Yep, fun stuff for sure. And this book. Again, I agreed with Shane. I think it's it's a nice testing ground for some of these stories. And if you guys read through, you probably noticed, I think it was at the end, it talks about Kickstarter. So they're one of those, they're one of those groups that's really trying to get a foothold. And so that's the toughest thing, right? You can put your stuff out there and it just never get noticed. So this Kickstarter thing is a great way, and they've caught on enough because they've got a series of books out, and they've got some things that they're going through Kickstarter right now and have been real successful. So they do have a little bit. They do have a following out there, which is great because I think we need this kind of stuff out here just to break up what everything else that's out there. Give. And I'm okay with a little bit of this. Treading over previous work a little bit, it's hard to get away from those elements. But I think at the same time, like we've all been saying, you can add just a little bit of character, just one line of dialogue or one extra dialogue box or one extra, frame, just add that extra flavor to it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, and to your point, as far as this, them reaching out and trying to get things started with Kickstarter and trying to, slowly get their stuff out there. I think that's what makes me the most proud about doing this show is bringing these kind of books to light and helping them out in any way. Marvel and DC, they don't need any help. They got millions of dollars. They can just, put all the advertising they want out there. But giving a voice to these, smaller indie people and helping them get a foothold. That's what I'm most proud about this show. So thanks again, Paul, for suggesting this one. This is a good one. Moving on to the next one, The Graveyard's Dog. I mean, for me, what I love, I'm a huge Bernie Wrightson fan. And so when I saw this, it had a lot of that kind of element to the artwork. And that setting really fits well with his, the work he did on Frankenstein was just unbelievable. And so this had that same kind of feel for it for me. Once again, with this story, I feel like the story was so close, but it just could have used an extra line or two. And I wanted to know why that connection to the dog impacted the owner. They didn't really explain, what, I don't want to give it away in the story, but what was happening with the dog when it, did its thing and how it impacted the owner. And there was no setup early on, just a line of dialogue in the beginning of the story that said their connection was, forged in the fires of hell or whatever it is, that, makes them connected physically. And that would have brought it to the top for me, but I still love the artwork so much. And the story is, very clear and easily understood. And there is a nice punch at the end. But just to really take it to the next level, I felt like that it needed that something extra.
Yeah, I had, now that you bring that up, yeah, I kind of agree because I really did like the story. I had a lot of fun with it. It was, it was another, to me, it was like, it treaded some previous ground, but not how I put it. You've seen some of those elements before, but again, it's in the overall, having read Tales from the Crypt, watch or read the old comics, Tales from the Crypt and stuff, you start to see some of those elements, carried throughout all the different stories. But in this one, it was still felt original to me. And because of those, having watched the Twilight Zone or Creep Show or I keep bringing those up because this is what this kind of feels like, the anthology stuff. I really got, I guess I just it was like one of those things where it's easy for me to accept that, well, now this dog is cursing him, because that's just how these stories work. This guy's a jerk. And so now he's cursed, and then the curse was original to me. I thought that was kind of the cool way they did it. Like you said, you didn't want to give it away, so I won't get into too much detail, but the way the guy got kind of cursed by his own dog, if you will, was I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool watching that happen. And then the little twist at the end too, I didn't see coming actually. So I was pleasantly surprised. And it was a fun, because this was the last one. So then again, you had the Crypt Keeper, if you, I don't know what they care. I don't know. I can't remember what name they gave that guy in the book, but he came in and gave his little morality, speech or whatever. So again, this one felt like it really harkened back to those old school stories. So yeah, it was fun. I like that one.
No, I totally agree with you. I think it's been, we once again, this, the idea that we've seen these kind of stories, but this one felt like they brought some fresh ideas to it, and the connection between the dog and, I did really enjoy it. I hope I didn't come across too negative. I just always want to, kind of push it to the next, to really make it sing. And I think that's tough with, I don't know, I've never drawn a comic or, I've written a couple, but never shown anybody. But they, I don't know if they do that where they'll share it with, a dozen or so people to get some feedback to say, what do you guys think about this? And that's a tough thing too, because if you share it with friends and family, oftentimes they're going to, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You're so talented, and no real actual constructive criticism that, can help you push it to that next level. That you need somebody who's is going to be a little rough on you. The kind of person that you almost don't want to send it to.
I was going to say, Shane, that says something about your family if they're like, oh, I love it. Because I was thinking family the other way. I was like, what? This is horrible. What are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? Family.
I've gotten that from family too. Yeah, a little too honest.
That's funny. Yeah. So, and so you guys know, the one of the artists and writers here, Frank Forte, he's sort of been he's sort of the consistent throughout most of the Asylum Press stuff. So I without researching it a whole lot, the company and all that, I don't know if he's sort of sort of at the top of that chain or what, but they put out a pretty good variety there. So there's always, I think some of what we see in this book has turned into some of what they have on full titles. They have one called Beyond Doomsday. They have another one called Warlash. And they have one called Chopper, which I think is kind of funny. It reminds me sort of like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's the cheerleader with a chainsaw type stuff, but it's fun stuff. They do zombies, vampires, all that. Really great stuff. So this is one of those that I think is going to be, it would be a hard company to keep up with in print unless you specifically request it. But I think I'm probably going to check with my local comic shop and see if I can start some of these, get a few more of these titles, just a one shot here and there and see how it looks going forward with other types of genres, because I really like this. I don't know that the other books are necessarily compilations like this. I think they're probably just more main storylines, but the Warlash one looks really great. It kind of reminds me of like a Aliens Doom, kind of thing. And I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. I love that stuff.
Nice. Well, cool. Well, this one's definitely gone longer as far as a review because we had a lot of 4 different stories to cover. But I think we should probably get into the review section. For me, I actually like these kind of stories. I like anthology books. Maybe I was just feeling generous. I don't know. I feel like the art as a whole package for me was 3 out of 5, which is, kind of right in the middle there. Some of the stuff was stronger and some was not as strong. Story wise, I'm going to go a little bit harder. I went a 2.5 out of 5, just because there's definitely some retread material there, and I feel like they didn't hand it off to enough people to get some suggestions on how to bring it to the next level. But overall, it's definitely a 3 out of 5 for me.
Well, I guess Shane, I really liked the art on 3 out of the 5 stories. And so that's going to be my vote for the art is 3 out of 5. I agree with you on the stories though, more like a 2.5 out of 5, only because I think only 2 of the stories showed like significant originality. There were elements. Again, like we said, there's always going to be elements of ideas from other stories, but this is a tough one. So I think if you're going to do something like this, definitely try to be as original as you can, whatever form that takes. And so I would give it for originality a 2.5 out of 5, and then overall a 3 out of 5.
I'll let Mike go this time.
Oh, well, I was going to see where you went, because unfortunately, Shane and Paul nailed my rating. They already nailed my rating. So the art, a couple of them weren't really my cup of tea as far as art, but I, again, respect styles and being able to show facial expressions or different action in different ways, to me is very cool that people can have that talent to do that. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 on the artwork. Again, it's kind of like hit and repeat. The 2.5 out of 5 for creativity, originality. Good. There were some good stories in there for sure. And I know it seems kind of harsh, but again, we are talking about 4 individual stories, and then a 3 overall. So,
yeah, I pretty much it is pretty much the same, but I went 3 straight across, and the reason why I did veer up into 3 with the originality so because I'm not when I opened the book, I knew right away what I was getting into with that, these horror anthology books, right? We've all read them, and got back in the 80s and 90s, I was diving into that, and I think like Marvel started doing their horror imprint again and stuff back. It was so there's a nostalgia feel for me on some of those stories, especially the first and last. So even though there wasn't like the middle ones, and then the middle one with the more the sci-fi element, which I really liked. So that's why I'm going to go 3 straight across, because and especially with the overall rating, some cool artwork choices, like with the one that looked like the wood cutting artwork. And all that, and then a couple of cool standouts with story, but overall it's like this cool nostalgia feel for me. So yeah, 3 out of 5 straight across the board.
Yeah,
Nice.
I think what jumped out to me is reading this, while maybe some of the originality was there, and in some stories, and maybe not in others. It definitely, like I said, makes me want to investigate some of their other titles, and I think that's the best testament to this company and the work that they put in here. Makes me want to seek out another title or two and see what it looks like. So that's, for me, they did their job, right? That's the goal. Suck you in.
I 100% agree. Yeah, good point. Well, cool. That was a fun one. Hope the viewers enjoyed that anthology episode. Maybe to make sure to hit the subscribe and the like button to help us out, so we keep bringing you good content like this. And we'll see you in the next one.